going to conferences all the time is the main driver for progress in your skill set and also your relationship, and basically any professional can become a better professional by attending conferences.
It's not the standard, okay? It's a movie theater, but the visual is great and the sound is great, and I've seen a lot of room and space, and I think it's organized well.
Seeing all the people here today and they're excited about stuff, and you can see the energy and the desire to learn and do new things.
And I was positively surprised about the depth, the technical depth of the sessions, and how that makes the tester part of the team.
I think developers do benefit from coming to QA conferences, just the same as testers can benefit from going to dev conferences. You've got to have a broad understanding of what's going on.
It's really inclusive. I would say it's super diverse. People are really, really open and friendly, and it's really organized.
Conferences are well worthwhile just for the ideas that they spark in people. When people come back to the office, they're full of ideas and they're all energized up.
Hi, I'm Amanda Perkins, also known as the QA Diva. I'm from a small town in the middle of the United States. I'm a quality engineer who does both manual and automation testing. I'm going to talk about how our backgrounds influence how we test. No two of us followed the same path, and that brings a great deal of diversity of thought to how we test. Our personal experiences shape our lives and how we do our jobs, and that will only lead us to be better testers. Hi everyone. I'm so glad that we could meet in this fashion. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I'm sorry none of us can, but I'm still glad that we're able to meet in some way. And I'm glad that you're here to talk with me about the human side of testing. It's all about how our experiences make us better testers, how the things we've learned along our paths have an influence on what we do. It's about remembering those things and using them to be better testers. Please feel free to post your questions and I'll answer them at the end, and you can join me for and ask me anything even. Let's go ahead and get started. As QAs, we're known for breaking things and for testing the limits and sometimes the patience of our team and our systems. We advocate for quality in all things, and we advocate for the end user. But do any of us actually think about how our varied backgrounds influence what and how we test? In this session, I want to explore how our previous and our current experiences subconsciously affect our testing, and how we can use those experiences and bring them to the forefront in order to be better testers all around. First, how about a little bit of an introduction? I'm Amanda Perkins. You can find me on Twitter at QA Diva, and I love talking about testing, or really just about anything. I've had about 8 years of experience. I've had manual and automation experience. I've tested both front ends and back ends, APIs, and SQL. I've been lucky enough to share some of my experiences in other talks, but what I really love to do is to push to humanize QA and humanize IT professionals. We are more than just robots. We're people, and what we do and how we interact should reflect that. Testing is so much more than making sure that something works. There are some out there that question what a QA's role actually is. I've heard things along the lines of, you're only here to break things, or you only look at the bad things, you never focus on the good. But that's not what we're trying to do at all. QA doesn't set out to break things. We set out to make sure that what we're testing not only works, but is what an end user expects to see. We're the voice of the user, both internal and external, so that we can deliver the best possible product. Yes, we do take a certain level of joy in finding new and fascinating ways to break the system, but it's all because we're imagining what a user would do. We look for those weak points in the armor so that the product we deliver can be the best possible product out there. Our main focus is to make sure the product that is being delivered by our team is the highest quality that we can provide. That doesn't mean just checking to make sure that it works. It means finding those edge cases where something could and usually does go wrong. It means providing feedback on what goes right and applauding the team's work. It means making sure that not only we cover the acceptance criteria, but that we think outside the box as to how this will affect our users. Yes, it definitely should work, but it should also look good. And as a UX manager once told me, it should also bring delight. Thinking like a user is more than just imagining what we think a user would do or what the requirements documentation tells us a user would potentially do. We have to take into account what a user actually would do. We have to get inside their heads. How do we do that? Well, we can think about the different people in our lives that interact with applications all the time. Our parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings, children, teachers, everyone we come across. We have to use what we know of ourselves even and how we interact with applications and other websites that we aren't testing. Those things that we like to use that have nothing to do with our jobs. We have to use what we know about people around us in order to think like a user. Think of this like personas that the business team or the design team creates, except these are real people. We have to think about how people who know less than we do will interact with our application. How will they navigate? Will they hit the buttons we expect them to hit? Something else we have to remember is that the look and feel is what the look and feel is like, not just the functionality. So often we get mired in the details of how something works that we don't look at how it looks or how easy it is to use. Is it easy to figure out? Does it look nice? Is it an application of nothing but a bunch of white space and a couple things here and there? Is it overly busy with too many things on the page? All of these questions can lead us to why we should think like a user, because that is where the real bugs are found. When our users do something that we don't think they would. If we can do these things preemptively, we can make sure that they are covered and that we've delivered the best possible experience out there. We can learn a lot about people around us by remembering our previous employments as well. Our journey to QA was never a straight line, or at least all the QAs I've ever met, including myself. We never grew up wanting to test software applications for a job. I mean, maybe we wanted to test video games, but we never thought it was a job or anything. We wanted to be other things. Musicians, writers, architects, veterinarians. Maybe we didn't know what we wanted to be when we grew up. So we set out to take on the world and do the things we thought we wanted to do. I worked in people-facing jobs for most of my career. Library, the movie store, a retail environment, a customer service call center. And there were lessons that I learned about people at each of these stops in my testing that I use now in my testing. I learned lessons about how to work with people, both professionally and personally. Being brash and abrasive will not get you into anyone's good graces. Having humility and taking the effort to learn more about what someone is saying will go a long way. Lessons about what people will put up with. In retail sales, we were taught not to take no as the first or the second answer. And this goes to show us what a user will end up putting up with. And believe it or not, they'll put up with a lot if in the end they're getting what they want or what they need. I learned lessons about how to interact with the world at large. When you're from a small town in the middle of the United States and you don't do much, you don't know a lot until you get out there and start doing things. Expanding your own horizons gives additional insight into how other people think and act. Knowing how others think will push a tester to think past themselves as they test. It's these lessons learned from these earlier experiences that fuel how and what we test. Working with people. This is a big lesson that we can take with us in our testing, both as a user and how we interact with our teams. I once worked for an online university. While I was there, I learned a very hard, very important lesson. Being brash and abrasive is not the way to get what you want. In some interactions with people, I would get defensive and immovable about my point, and I didn't take a moment to hear someone else's side. I was convinced I was right, and I wouldn't take a moment to even ask a question of anyone else. This cost me a lot, as people were not going to hear what I had to say, even if it was a good thing. So think about how many times have we had a moment where we filed a bug and we were told that it wasn't reproducible, or that it wasn't even a bug at all. That can sometimes be very upsetting. We take just as much pride in our work as our development team takes in theirs. Did you stand up and get angry? Or did you take a moment and ask why they thought the way that they did? It's these lessons that we learned in dealing with others that we can take forward for our interactions, because it's not just our job to test, but we have to be able to communicate with each other. We have to be able to talk to our peers about how we found this bug and why we feel so strongly that it is a bug. We have to be able to listen to what the other party has to say and ask those clarifying questions. We have to know how to let go if it's decided that what we found either isn't a bug or it's just not high priority. We've had experiences before that have shown us when we stand our ground, when we should stand our ground, and when we should just choose our battles. It's the lessons that we learn in these interactions that help us to have better interactions. If you were defensive and immovable in the past, maybe you learned that listening and hearing the other side and trying to come up with a different approach to explain your point works better to get your idea across. It's the little things we learned about ourselves and about people around us that go toward teaching us how to interact better with our teams. As a much younger person, I worked at a library. Believe it or not, I actually learned a good deal there. It was mostly around how to adjust what you're presenting to who is in your audience. We don't think about it, but when we demo or when we are presenting something, we take stock of who's in the audience, who we're talking to. With this lesson, we can consciously do so now instead of relying on our subconscious to do so when we walk into the room or when we're talking to someone. I'll tell you a story. As a library page, I was tasked with putting books away. Sometimes as I'm in the stacks, someone would ask me for help in locating something, and I had to be able to help them out. Depending on who it was, I actually changed the way in which I spoke with them. If it was an adult, as I was only about 18 or 19 at this point, I tended to be a little more formal, a lot more sirs and ma'ams. If it was a younger person or a child, I had a softer tone and took a moment to walk the person to exactly where they needed to be. These moments came into stark contrast when I started running one of the 3 story hours each week. Excuse me. You see, parents would bring their children and we would read and show a movie and have small activities for the group for about an hour each week. I tended to have the younger crowd because I ran the hour in the morning when parents seemed to bring their littler ones into the library where it was a little more okay to be noisy. While we had a theme every week, each presenter had a different set of books and activities centered around the age group. We had to work to make sure that we were age appropriate. We can do these same things in testing. We think about who our audience is. Our audience can be one person, a dev that we're explaining the bug to, or several people. Maybe it's an internal demo and we are presenting. Questions we can ask as we're testing are like, are they internal or external users? Are they tech savvy or will they struggle? Can they easily navigate without too much trouble? If I put this in front of grandma, will she understand? If you ask yourself these questions while you test and you temper your testing to the answers and to your audience, you'll definitely start to become a much more well-rounded tester. IT is starting to evolve. We're starting to have more opportunities to speak with our actual users, internal and external. And as IT and software evolves, the quality team, us, we have to evolve as well. This means that we have to be able to adapt to our audience, no matter who they are. Again, our audience could be a single dev or our entire development team, and we could have to explain our bug. It could be the business team, and we have to explain what we know about the app currently and how we test it in order to show them something they haven't thought about, or explain why changing something could be a struggle for users to grasp. Maybe our audience is an actual user because we were selected to help run the user acceptance testing. At any and all of these points, and countless others, we are having to communicate with people. We have to take what we've learned over the years on working with people and apply it to these people-facing moments. We can't yell and scream and tell them they're just not doing it right. We have to take the knowledge that people will listen to a confident, seemingly informed person and take direction from them. Sometimes by seemingly informed, I mean you fake it till you make it. Maybe you don't know everything, but you know enough. We have to adjust our tone depending on who is in the room. We have to recognize that the people around us may not know exactly what we're talking about, and that can go for both users and developers. We have to make the conscious effort to adjust what we're presenting to who's in the room. Can we be more technical at this point? Should we explain exactly how to log in and to get where we want them to go? How much detail do we need to provide so that the person that is listening will have a better understanding of what I'm trying to say? Do I even understand what I'm trying to say? Small questions like this as we present these things to the people around us. And that leads us to what people will actually put up with. And that's a lesson I learned in retail. Think about this. You're in a shop and the shopkeeper comes up and asks if you're looking for anything. You reply that you're looking for this and they tell you about some things about it. You're not 100% sold, but they still ask if you'd like them to grab one from the back and meet you at the register. You say, no, thank you. I'm still thinking about it. Well, they try to talk you into it by offering you their free with purchase item. You say thanks, but I'm not sure. They try one more time, and either you decide, yes, this is the thing that I want, and I'll take that free with purchase item. Or you say, no, thank you, not today. That is the rule of 3 no's in action. It happens all the time. And I was taught this as a salesperson. About 90% of the time, this actually works. You keep going until you get that final no, or they decide to purchase the item after all. Because people will actually put up with a lot if they think they're either getting a good deal or it's something they think they need. Users are the same way. Think about the tolerances you have in your app or your website. Think about the bug that you reported, but the team prioritized it lower because it just wasn't something that the everyday user would get too upset about. Maybe you're a gamer like I am. Think about how much lag, how long the loading screen takes, or how much you'll let go wrong with the game before you just shut it off and never play it again. See? Users will put up with a lot. And we need to keep that in mind as we test too. There are certain things where we could report as a bug, but aren't too big of a deal. But then there are showstoppers on other things that we know our users would not accept having issues. Using what we know and what we know that people will put up with, we can make that differentiation while testing. We can think about these tolerances and determine if they are acceptable. We have to put aside our understanding of the application and look at it through the eyes of someone who doesn't have our insider information. Is that user willing to have a long load time or a certain bug if they can still get to the end game, to the completion of their particular task? How we interact with the world at large is another lesson that we've learned. There are things we learn as young adults, even from the world around us. Things like how to pay our bills, how to take care of our cars and our apartments. There are things like how we interact with the checkout person at the grocery or the banker who helps us deposit our paychecks. There are even those things that we learn about interacting with our devices, like how to pay attention and not walk blindly into oncoming traffic with our eyes buried in our smartphones. I have things I call small town interactions versus big city. I grew up in a very small town in the middle of the United States. There were lessons that I learned when I traveled to bigger cities. Things like how people aren't as friendly and are definitely more rushed. I learned how to hail a taxi and how to use public transportation because I'd never had to do that before. Just interactions in stores were different. Salespeople who don't talk to you because they can tell, or maybe they smell it on you, that you're from a small town and may not be able to afford anything there, whether it's true or not. There are a lot of assumptions that are made from first glance. Everyone does it. And these interactions color the way that we interact with people going forward. And there are things that we can keep in mind too as we test. Think about how that rushed business person would use your app versus someone who's just casually using it. How would someone want to make a purchase through your application? Does your application make it convenient to do things that people need in order to move on with their day? How would a young person who has all the time in the world and knows less than the rushed person who has very little time to get important things done interact with your application? These things that we learned about people, we can now use them to help us determine the best ways to test. How we deal with the world around us can help us to make decisions about how we test. We can internalize these moments and use them to flavor our testing. We can create inner stories that help us. Stuff like interactions with people from other countries versus our own. This is a big one that I was hoping to have more of this year, but be that as it may. Everything comes down to assumptions. We make certain assumptions about people from countries outside of our own. We assume the other person may or may not understand what we're saying. We change the words that we use in order to try to make it a more generalized, more understandable thing. We may assume that they're from a certain area and therefore they know of something that we've heard of through passing, maybe on the news, for instance. I've heard that in some places, people from our state of Texas are all that other countries think of when they think of the United States. There's a very distinct Southern accent, kind of like this, and a look, kind of like the one in the picture, maybe that cowboy thought. Not everybody does it, but it's one of those assumptions that are made. We're not all like that, by the way. These experiences that we've had previously humanize what we're doing. Whether our assumptions are right or wrong, that part matters, but not as much as the fact that we had these experiences. They take us outside of our robot technological mindset, and they make us human. We take these very human experiences and understandings into our testing, whether we think about it or not. And it's these human experiences that help us to understand what our users are doing. They help us to see what we could do better. Even our assumptions help. Maybe we assume older adults are slower and less tech savvy. Maybe we assume all young people are selfish and wouldn't want to help anyone else out. So we test slower. We take more time between each test step to see what happens. We then test as fast as we can, as though we were the young person who can actually type text messages with both thumbs, which is something I still cannot do to this day. We can take what we assume, what we think we know, and apply it to our testing, showing that there are multiple human interactions with our applications that could happen. They may be based on assumptions that may or may not be correct, but they added to a human view of our applications. Assumptions are usually thought to be bad, but we can use them when we think a user is going to do something. Our assumptions as we test help us find those outlier bugs because we assume things that other people didn't. Everything we've ever done has an effect on how we test, how we used other apps, how we played video games, things we've read, classes we've taken. It all has some effect on what we do, what we learn about people, and how people react to applications and software, how people react to each other in positive and negative situations, how people will do things we expect and will most certainly do things that we don't. What we experience with other applications, with color blindness. I have a difficulty telling the difference in certain shades of blues, blacks, and purples. There are people that have complete or partial blindness and screen readers, and how our applications and software work with those screen readers. An inability to use a touch screen. How many times have you done something with a touch screen, maybe your phone, maybe a tablet, and the touch point's too small, or there's no way to tell what to touch, or that what you touched works? These are all things we can keep in mind as we test. What we do, the causes we back, the way we create a test plan, what we learned as we were early in our QA lives on how a test plan is created and what it should contain. What we fail at, most importantly, what we fail at, is the points where we stumble that push us to advocate for quality. When we missed a functionality that seemed minor, but ended up being a big deal to the end user. When we tried to test something and didn't have the full understanding. Those times we had to decide that it was all right to let a low priority bug be introduced. Like I said, we're not purposefully setting out to break things. We're taking our knowledge and our experience to think like a user and to make sure that the system can handle what an actual user will do, not just what we think they will or won't do. We make sure everything that's in the requirements is covered, but we also will journey off the happy path to cover the weird things. We think outside the box of the requirements. It's what we do, how we use our previous experiences to lead us. Sometimes our experiences are the clue for others to help us realize our true place as a QA. Sometimes, like I said earlier, we didn't know where we were supposed to be. We fluttered around with no real sense of direction. Someone else looked at us and saw that we were meant for something else. They pushed us towards that path that we're on now. Take my husband, for instance. Long before we were married, I actually worked for him. He was my first boss at the online university. I was just one member of many on the team. He took many opportunities to push me into positions where the team would just kind of naturally follow me. Sometimes he would tell me stuff like, they'll listen to you. If you say that change sucks, but you still have to do it, they'll follow along, even if you don't want to do it. And a good majority of the time, he wouldn't tell me what he was doing at all. He just put me in a position and let me do whatever I would do. And some of those moments with my teammates, I still carry with me. I try to think about how to influence others when I find an issue or a bug. I think about how I say things so that others are more apt to hear and to listen. The time that he got me into IT was the most important by far. I was working with him in a different position in the registrar's office. We had a back-end program that we used, and I seemed to take to it like a duck to water. It was a natural for me. There came to be several instances where he would assign a task that had to do with that system, and I could easily accomplish it. Well, time went on, and he found out that there was a position open in IT for a BA. He pushed me to apply because he knew the manager and could put in a good word. Well, I applied, but they decided on someone else. But they thought that I could join the team as a QA, even though I had no idea what it was. But I decided, why not? They'll train me, and I can figure it out. But it was those moments with the tech systems where my boss saw something in me that made him realize that I should be in the IT department. He found an opening and he pushed me to pursue it. And if not for that push, I never would have found testing. I'd never be here. Our roads are long and winding. We move from here to there, always hunting for the right place to be. Some of us started in small jobs, library pages, video store clerks, baristas, retail sales associates, customer service call center employees. We spend years doing things we don't necessarily find passion in, but we do it in hopes that it will spark our passion or that we will find the next right thing. We wound around into jobs that would pique our interest, but somewhere deep inside, we knew that wasn't where we belonged. But we did our best, and we learned things along the way. We just weren't necessarily as happy as we could be. And after all that time, we found our passion, and we found what we wanted to do. We found our place, and we brought all the things we learned along the way with us. It's these experiences that we had before that influence our testing. We think about the weird things we see as we're playing our favorite Assassin's Creed video game and wonder if something similar could happen in our app. We keep these things in mind as we test. We think about what is acceptable when a page load takes more than 2 seconds. We think about what the best experience is when we see a typo in the copy. We push for a better color scheme because a relative is colorblind and would never see the error message. We even push for a better placement of a button because the page will flow better if we moved it from the right to the left. We think about how our aunt would struggle with the application, but her kids wouldn't. So how do we test as though she's the one our app is catering to? We see reds and yellows on the page and think about how dear old dad would have a hard time making that out and making out that it's an error because he's colorblind enough that he can't even match his socks. We search for those moments we know will be showstoppers. We find some things, and some testers will find some things that other testers won't. And that's okay, because no two testers are the same. Different experiences in life with people and software happen all the time, which is why no two testers are or ever will be the same. Every tester's experiences are different, and that's not a bad thing. All testing insight is needed. QA isn't trying to be bossy or demanding. They're attempting to reveal what they see as potential issues. They're thinking ahead to what a user would expect to tolerate, and surfacing that for the team to think about as they are developing a product. There's not one style to testing. Everyone has a little bit of a different way of doing things. Some will work off of a plan, and some will wander off and do what feels right. Some will very strictly stay to the requirements and throw up flags immediately when something is outside, and others will just keep a list of everything they find. Some will write highly detailed bugs with screenshots and videos and a bunch of notes and reproduction steps, and some will just jot down a few notes in the ticket and say it needs to be fixed. There are even wild debates in the testing community on whether QA or tester is the correct moniker. Quality assurance is a most undesirable title, as it is thought that we assure nothing. We can only assure that what we have tested meets the requirements. Some say tester is the same as checker, and that what we do is so much more than checking. I tend to go with quality advocate, as we advocate for quality in our product, and we advocate for a quality user experience. No one tests the same. That being said, no one is trying to test the same. We all have different things we look at and look for. We think about our experiences and we test to those. We learn from each other and we take that knowledge into our testing. We share experiences and maybe something sticks with someone else and affects their testing too. But it's the beauty of the different insights and understanding that help us to be good testers. Each tester has a different eye and will find things that others won't. And that's okay too. Just because no two testers are the same doesn't mean we can't have a standard. We use what we know, what we've done, and create test plans. Even if they're just a couple small notes on what to look at, we create some kind of a plan on how to test what we've been given. Our teams work together to set standards of testing and tracking what we are doing. Those will always vary depending on how your team works together. We use our influence and our knowledge of how strange people are to ask questions when it comes time for design and requirements meetings. We look at the tickets and we think about what is expected and what a user would do or want, and we raise the issue. We question whether or not this is something we need or if we could wait. We advocate for a quality user experience when we notice something seems a bit clunky or could be done better. We use tools and frameworks to at least set a baseline of what we expect, what we want to use for our quality teams. There are test management tools like TestRail or TM4J that we use to keep track of our tests. We use automation frameworks like Selenium or Jest or Puppeteer to make sure that we have one base to create all of our automation in. We work as a team to create standards that will work for all of us on an organizational level. We determine if using a spreadsheet to track issues is best, or if we should just create tickets as we go. We use the various skills and knowledge of the team members to take charge over certain areas of our testing, either by manual test cases or in the creation of automation. We have meetings weekly or even daily to find out where we stand on our projects and what we can do to help each other out. We raise issues and follow through with our team on how to overcome them. We work with our organization to determine the best ways to quantify and measure an almost immeasurable job. It is quality, after all. And in everything we do, we bring our experiences with us, and that's what makes us successful testers. So QA is more than just testing or checking. It's understanding, it's advocating, it's communicating, it's knowing when to stand up and when to let it go. We pursued what we thought were our passions and followed paths beaten and unbeaten. We took computer science classes, or we didn't. No matter how we did it, we have come to where we should be. Whether we started at the library or the video store, or somehow someone along the way pushed you toward being a tester, we followed our own path and we found where we were meant to be. We found out what quality really means by where we stumbled. And sometimes, especially at first, man, did we stumble. We had stops along the way, but we eventually got to the method of practice we were meant to have. We took what we knew and what we learned and applied it to what we do, just as we use what we learned as children in school to influence our thoughts and our actions today. We use everything we learned along the way, and it influences our testing. Whether we see things a different way or if we see things the same way, we use what we learned, and we are continuously learning to push our testing practice. And that's not a bad thing. Learning more and adding to what we know will never be a bad thing. It expands our understanding and helps us build past our current practice. We know that no two QAs will ever be the same, but that's good, because as you build a QA team, each unique QA will bring a different insight to what quality should be and should mean. They bring their learning and their experiences together and build standards to testing as a team. Those standards can be presented to the organization as how we test our app. And people start to build trust in what we do and how we do it, and no longer blame us for just finding the bad things or trying to break the system. They see our quest for quality. Everything we've done before comes with us into testing, and it's what shapes us to do what we do best. And more than anything, we are not just testers. We are human. We are people. And to quote author, software tester, and founder and CEO of Satisfice, James Marcus Bach, everything really interesting that happens in software projects eventually comes down to people. Thank you so much for coming today. Again, you can find me on Twitter at the QA Diva or via email at the.qa.diva.1@gmail.com. I am always up for talking testing. And if you have any questions, please feel free to post them. I will answer them now. Also, there will be an Ask Me Anything. Please feel free to join me and honestly ask me anything. So one of the questions I've received is how to communicate with developers if they don't want to fix bugs. This one is hard. I do understand this one. I've had to deal with developers that don't want to fix bugs often. It's just a matter of you continue to try to talk to them. And if you have to escalate in some cases. Talk to another developer, talk to the team as a whole. Whatever you do, if you do try to talk to the team as a whole, try not to point fingers or single that person out. It makes the relationship between you even harder if you play that blame game, if you point fingers and say, so-and-so doesn't want to help me. If you can just make it more of like a general question to the group and just say, hey, I found a bug. Can anybody help me out? Sometimes you can find someone that will. There are some people that act like that, and sometimes you can't get past it, unfortunately, but try your best to open the lines of communication. Find something that you have in common that you like and try to build a relationship so that maybe they feel a little more trust next time that you bring something up. Another question that I have is, what if our experience is different from users? When we think users will use software in one way and they will use in another. How do we spot those assumptions? Oh, this is a great question. It's all about kind of keeping that in mind. If you think that if you have assumed that a user is going to use something in a particular way, and you find out that they don't, take note of it, write it down, internalize it, add it to your regression plan. Make it something that you've learned that you can take forward with you. To spot those assumptions, think outside the box. If you think that a tester that a user is going to do one thing, do it the exact opposite of way that you were going to do it. Test it the way that you were going to do it, but then test it completely differently. The easiest way to spot the assumptions and to have a different experience than the user is to write a separate test case that is exactly the opposite of what you just did. It seems strange, I know, but if you can train your mind to think that other way, like, okay, we think the user is going to do this. What if the user doesn't do this? What if the user clicks outside of this box? What if the user types an emoji instead of an actual word? If you can make these strange scenarios and be creative, be inventive, use that imagination that QAs have. I know we have it. Sometimes we kind of lock it down, but if we can use our imaginations, we can think outside of those issues and we can find new ways, right? We can always do that. So just keep trying to think outside of that. And if you find that somebody did do it a different way, again, write that as a test case for next time. Write that down as something that you can take into the future with you. Okay. I don't have any more questions, but please feel free to post them. I have a couple minutes left here to speak with you. I'm so glad that you guys came, that there's people out there hearing this. I wish I could meet you in person. Maybe next time. There will be an Ask Me Anything right after this that I will join. Give me a few minutes to get there. And I will, I'd love to talk to you. Again, it's kind of an Ask Me Anything, so feel free to ask me anything. Ask me about human side of testing. Ask me what my favorite color is, what my dog's name is, anything at all. I want to thank all of you out there. It looks like I have approximately 70 viewers, so I'm so glad that you came. I'm happy to be here. And I hope that everything has been going well for you for this conference. It seems like a great conference. It's a little early here in the States. It's about almost 6:30 in the morning, but I wouldn't have it any other way. This is a really great experience. I hope everyone is staying safe out there. I hope that your testing practices go on to be awesome. If you ever have questions or want to talk about testing, find me. I'm out in the Twitter sphere. I'm more than happy to talk about it. I have a lot of contacts. If you have a question and I can't answer it, I know enough people that I can find you an answer. Or just chat me up. That's fine too. About 2 more minutes. I'll wait to see if anybody else has a question about anything. Sorry, a little parched. I love giving talks. I love telling everyone how QAs are human and we're not the bad guys. We're not the villains. We're really not. We're just trying to do our jobs. I don't see any more questions coming in. So at this point, I think I'm probably going to say goodbye. Please, again, feel free to come over to the Ask Me Anything corner and chat. Oh, here's a couple. How do you know that testing is for you? Are you curious? Do you like to look for ways that the system doesn't work? Do you like learning about testing? It's one of those that when you feel it, you know it's right. But if you're curious and you like to do that kind of thing and you like to dig in, it's probably a good path for you. Many of these things have to do with a certain mindset and are subjective to the tester. How would you suggest structuring these concepts to help set the mindset? I will take this into the Ask Me Anything corner, honestly, because this one's going to have a little bit more of an answer. So if you guys want to meet me over there, I'd love to talk to you guys, you folks. And so I will see you over there. Thank you again for coming. Have an awesome day.